Black African power. What's good? What's happening? A well-organized lie defeats a disorganized truth every time. Woo-hoo-wee. Man, y'all already know what it is, man. It's Godkiller in the house. And I come to do what I got to do, and I'm going to do what I got to do. Standing tall, standing strong. Hey, man, y'all know what it is, man. Bobby banging this bitch. Man, we have a red flag and a pseudo alert. If someone with no credentials claims to overthrow an entire academic field, especially without peer review, evidence, collaborative scholarship, it is a major indicator of pseudoscience. Critical evaluation, not charisma or conspiracy, is how scientific resolution happens, ladies and gentlemen. Claiming to overthrow a specific concept within the field, like the meaning of Kemet in Egyptology, without formal training or scholarly rigor, still strongly signals pseudo scholarship or fringe revisionism. Revisionism. Y'all gotta pay attention, man. Especially when the individual, I'm gonna name some things, man, lacks Egyptological language training, like hieroglyphic grammar, Middle Egyptian syntax and lexicon, does not publish in peer-reviewed journals. Man, I ain't gotta say no names, do I? Dismisses decades of interdisciplinary research, linguistics, archaeology, soil science, and philology, and replaces it with speculative or identity-driven reinterpretations. Man, sounds like a lot of people, huh? Well, here's a case study on Kemet, Black land versus Black people. Okay? It's the established Egyptological consensus. Most Egyptologists translate Kemet as the Black land, referring to the dark, fertile soil, the Nile Valley, in contrast to the desert, the red land. This reading is supported by grammatical structure, feminity ending, typical of toponyms. Contextual contrast in tunes, text, and offering formula. Ancient choreographic designations that differentiate between ecological zones rather than race or rather than races. No indirect self-identification as Black people racially in native texts, man. It's not there. Let me give y'all some scholarly references. Let me see here. James P. Allen, Middle Egyptian, An Introduction to Language and Culture, the Hieroglyphs, 3rd edition, 2014. Gardner, Egyptian Grammar, 3rd edition, 1957. Bayard, An Introduction to Archaeology of Ancient Egypt, 2020. And Baines, Atlas of Ancient Egyptian. Man, we got some pseudoscience red flags in reinterpreting Kemet. So I want to give y'all some red flags. I want to give y'all some pseudo claimant behavior and break down the academic standard here. Red flag is no Egyptological training. They don't got no training. They do it on their own. They self-taught. Pseudo-claimant behavior, self-taught using online glossaries. Academic standard would be formal study of ancient Egyptian grammar and scripts. I said formal study, not the flim, flim, blim, blam, boom. Red flag. Dismissal of linguistic morphology. Pseudo-claimant behavior claims Kemet refers to skin color. Academic standard recognizes Kim is an adjective modifying in geographic terms. Red flag, y'all. No peer-reviewed publication. This is key. Peer review is essential in the scientific study. In Egyptology is a scientific study. Pseudo-claimant behavior. YouTube lectures or blogs. That's what you're saying about, right? Academic standard publishes in journals like the Journal of Egyptian Archaeology. Red flag. Appeals to identity politics. Boy, they do it all the time. Pseudo-claimant behavior. They're hiding that the Egyptians were black. Man, when y'all start hearing that conspiratorial nonsense, I'm hiding this. I can't let you see this. Shh. Boy, they cheating. Academic standard prioritizes epigraphic and archaeological evidence. Conspiratory tone. That's a red flag. Conspiratory tone. That is a red flag. Pseudo-claimant behavior. The field is dominated by Eurocentrism. Ain't nothing but the white boy. You know, like the white man sounds, white boys this and the white boys that. Academic standard engages in scholarly debate using evidence, man. Now, why this still counts as pseudoscientific thinking? Just this one little idea. Why? Even though it might seem like just one term, if someone claims to overturn a linguistic consensus without mastering the field's tools like grammar, comprehensive linguistics, or hieroglyphic corpus analysis, they're not engaging in academic reform, but in revisionism without rigor. This isn't how the scientific or humanistic fields evolve, y'all. Watch this. Fields change through the accumulation of evidence and the eternal critique. I'm going to say this again. And the internal critique of experts, not by untrained individuals declaring that everyone else is wrong. So if you want to make a legitimate challenge to Egyptological concepts, get trained in the language and archaeology of Egypt, publish in peer-reviewed Egyptological journals, present at conferences, and subject claims to scholarly critique. Once again, subject claims to scholarly critique. They ain't doing this. Use primary sources, pyramid text, carver text, in their native language. Build arguments using historical linguistics, not just cultural interpretations. In conclusion, claim and overthrow the standard meaning of Kemet from black land to black people without training and academic validation is a classic red flag of pseudoscience. It mimics scholarly work, but lacks the methods, evidence, and transparencies that define, man, Egyptology, man.
Bobby Banger from the block, seen it all raw, tough. Streets of Baltimore where survival's always rough. Joined the Marines fighting for a life he could save. But back in the hood, he felt like a runaway slave. Started an army, not of guns but of wisdom. I'm a rock squad, truth the anthem, we ain't just a Godkiller Bobby Banger on his path for the truth. Empower the people, give them wisdom as the proof. Black power rising, knowledge shines like a light. He's fighting for the future, ready to ignite. Selling drugs on the corner just to put food on plates, but deep in his heart, he knew he had greater fates. From the traps to the lab, he fights ignorance raw, teaching evolution while shaking up the law. The real black atheist is changing the game, waking up minds never the same. Godkiller Bobby Banger on his path for the truth, empower the people.
Sit back, man, and enjoy the experts.
Go ahead and ask the question from Joel. So Joel asks, ancient Egypt had a complex genetic history influenced by interactions with both sub-Saharan Africa and the Near East. What is the most accurate way to describe the first dynasties? Can we say they are Black because they came from the South? How do you define who is Black?
I don't use the word Black usually, number one. Number two, I talk about populations that are biogeographical or biohistorical Africans. And I acknowledge a range of variation in Egypt. I don't know what color the first dynasties were. And depending on, what or how you want to say that, I will say that the early populations of Egypt, as I said earlier, if you do an analysis on skeletons, because we don't have ancient DNA, you find that they show affinities with people in the South. That doesn't necessarily mean that they look identical to them, but it does mean that they had affinities to them. So the world is not simply divided into sub-Saharan Africa and Europe. Or there's an indigenous, think in terms of an indigenous Saharan populations or indigenous, more northern populations that are equally African but different. That's the best way to answer that and the best way to think of it.
Deep black, carbon black skin. And people ask, is that because she was from Luxor, she was from Egypt South? Maybe it's possible, but it also means that she as a divine figure was associated with fecundity, new life, this black earth of Egypt. So the Egyptians called their land where the Nile Valley flooded Black, but they didn't call themselves Black. And then one more thing, when people
hold on. That's important.
Which part?
Well, you said that they call the land Black, not themselves. Say that again, please, for the people in the back.
Okay, so the Egyptians called their land Black. They called it Kemet, but they didn't. They did not call themselves Black, and there is a reason. And the reason is it's only part of Egypt. One reason I don't use the term Kemetology, for instance. Because it's a reasonable thing. You're like, but it's Kemet, so I don't get it. If you're doing Kemetology, you're only studying the people who live along the Nile Valley. You're not studying you're not studying the peoples in the desert. You're not studying the people in Nubia. You're not studying the people who are part of different worlds and going in and out. And the desert is not like just this Saharan space of nothing. The desert is a place full of life and herding possibilities and mining and quarrying and people's moving in and out. And that's Deshret. That's the Red Land. So if I'm saying, I'm in, I understand that Egypt as a word is a totally ridiculous post-colonial concept. I get it. But because Egypt is such a complicated place, and because the people in the Nile Valley were like, yes, we're the land of the Kemet, but then would go out and try to take over the land of the Deshret, of the Red, and would claim both, who am I to say that it's only Kemetology? I can't. And who am I to say that Egypt is only Kemet? It's not. It's much more. And I don't want to do disservice to the Pangrave people, to the Medjay people, to people that are part of Egyptian discourse but didn't live on the Black land. So it's a much richer conversation. And then, strangely, though this is going to piss some people off, using the term Egypt, which is a weird word that comes from from the Coptic, from the Memphite temple, Hut Kata, and then you get Egypt in there. And it's like a Greek understanding of a place that's just applied to the whole country, and it's stupid. I agree that it's stupid, but there's no better word that's going to combine the whole thing for us that's useful. So why not use a construct? Because the other words are so localized that they can only be used for particular places and cannot be used for the whole.
Right? It can mean a lot of different things. Yeah? Maktab means library. You just add an M. And kitab is a book, right? Do you see what I mean? The kitab thing means something related to a book in Arabic. In Egyptian, similarly, Kemet, another root of 3 sounds, right? 3 consonant sounds, refers to something that is black in color. Yeah? So it can be used for different words relating to blackness via the Kemet sound. It doesn't mean they're the same thing. It just means they all have something in common. So when it is used for Kemet, the black land, it carries the classifier, and you identified it correctly. It is indeed a classifier, or as Egyptologists sometimes call it, a determinative, which shows that it's a place, right? You were showing me. You showed me the glyph. It's a place with crossroads that you're seeing from the sky. That says it's a location that is referring to the black land, the inundation, the Nile Valley. This one, you see, the classifier has changed. And so now it is cattle with horns. And it's referring to cattle that is black in color. Okay? So it's not the same word. Like I'm saying, everything that's sort of Kemet related, like this guy who calls himself Kemi, the black, in his nickname, right, his epithet, that's also black. It's a slightly different word. It's got the same root, so it means something that's connected. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Okay, let's finish. All right, let's finish.
Okay,
Here we go.
sure.
Here we go.
Bring it on. Bring it on.
Here we go. Here we go.
I love language. You can't stop me. I love it.
All right, here we go.
I need to see a few more people, please. Hook that up. We ain't. It's like we on recess. What you think this mean? If you don't think it mean what you mean what it look like it mean, write what you think this means on the in the chat. I'm gonna give a second. Let's listen. All right. Somebody said black herd, black cattle. Yep. Now, the person who said black herd was taking into account that we got a plural strokes at the bottom.
Yeah, it's
in this instance, he's correct. That is not just one cattle. Cattle could be a plural word too. But this is simple. Now notice, the determinative is not modifying. Now, I want us to be clear. This is an adjective, but in this word, this is a noun.
Yes.
Kemet. What do I mean? You have to look at it like this. The ancient Egyptian who spoke this out his mouth didn't say anything but Kemet. Although he was referring to cattle in that instance.
Time out.
He did not have to.
Let's get some clarity on that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I can sort of clarify that a little, or not. Just because the Egyptians, when they write down their sounds, they only write the consonant sounds, right? Mm-hmm. We only see Kemet, but you can't say Kemet. None of us would speak that way. All languages introduce vowel sounds in between, like Kemet, right? So that it sounds okay for our ears. What we don't know is exactly how the Egyptians pronounced this word as distinct from Kemet, the Black Land. They may have used different vowels, right? One of the ways that we can tell if there is, if it's pronounced differently, one of the ways is to look at texts from the Christian era of Egypt, the Coptic period, in which they wrote out the words in Greek script. Now, in Greek script, of course, you have consonants, you have vowels, you can write everything out exactly as it sounds. But it's from a much later period, right? It's about 1,500 years after, like the Pharaonic period that I'm talking about. So it's not going to be exactly the same sounds, just like American English has changed a huge amount in 100 years, 200 years, 400 years, right? It's changed a lot in sound. So we can't say it's going to be exactly the same, but if we find different words with Kemet in them in Coptic, we can see that they were actually distinguishing words based on the vowel. So what I want to say is what he's saying, that it's the same word, it can't be verified because all we can see is the consonants.
Okay.
Right? So I'm not saying he's wrong because it's not verifiable. That's really the main thing.
Okay. All right. Let us move on.
Okay.
Go.
To say Kemet, unless, of course, the census mandate that you separate because you're talking about something other black. But one thing we know is that black things can just take on the term Kemet.
They can.
So this cattle.
Did you want? Yeah. Anytime you want me to stop, I can stop. Okay.
Because we have this word kemem, like
Okay.
Kemet also used as the color black. We also have the color.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
In the dictionary, this divine herd of black cattle is called Kemet. Now, we got a word and the category of the word.
How do we get divine out of that, though?
If you switch.
Oh, you want us to stop, Sosa?
Yeah. Oh, we got the good one coming too.
Yeah.
How do you get divine? How do you get the divine interpretation out of that glyph?
That's an excellent question, and I was wondering that myself, to be honest. So I don't know whether he's specifically talking about like whether he's taking it from a particular context. Well, there are. I mean, it could be. I mean, from what I can see, I don't know many cases in which they're talked about as being black cattle, because there are a lot of words for cattle in Egyptian, right? Heaps of them.
Like Kakem would be black cattle. Right?
There's Kem, yeah, right. You could say Kakem, exactly. Very well done, exactly. And there's another word. There's Ka, there's Ihu, or Ich, in the singular. So yeah, Nega. There are a couple of different words, that go in that direction of describing a cattle. In this particular one, whether you have this black ones, this would be a sort of direct, translation of Kemet or Kemut, actually with the plural, might just be coming up in a religious context, because there are certain cattle that are regarded as incarnations of gods. Okay. For instance, the Apis bull or the Nevis bull, are seen as representations of gods in the world. So in that case, if you look in the corpus, I'm just having a quick look, and I can see that these are indeed seen as being children of a god. But your friend who made the video might know that, like, he might know the text that he's taking this from. This is always the problem with these instructions, is if you're just seeing it as one word out of context, it's very hard to know where exactly is the meaning coming from. So I would say, yes, I think we can find indications that talking about cattle as black ones can come from religious contexts and refer to them as divine cattle, but it doesn't come from the word itself. It comes from knowing what kinds of texts that word comes from, right? Okay. So it's not inherent. It's not inherent to the word itself.
Okay.
So he's right, but it's not inside the word.
Okay. All right, here we go.
Okay.
The category of the word, people are going to tell you They're going to throw their hands in the air and they're going to say hella grammar lies. As apparent as it is, they're not talking about cattle anymore. No matter what your brain is doing, I want to ask, what are they talking about now? Again, we'll go back to the cattle. And no one had a problem saying that this is talking about a herd of black cattle. The only thing that changes is the ideogram, the determinative is going to change to humans.
Okay, all right. Got you, freeze. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So I would say here, yeah, this is absolutely a legitimate word. And what we're seeing, this is referring, like pursuant to my comment earlier, that we have this word for a black land, of being the Nile Valley. So it's actually a place name. When you have then a people added to a place, and that doesn't just go for this case as with Kemet, it goes for all place names. It refers to the people belonging to that place. So you can change the classifier. You can have a classifier that shows you a place and you replace it with a people classifier and it tells you inhabitants of that place. So this is absolutely a real word. And it is referring to Egyptians, people living in the Nile Valley, right? Because Kemet means Nile Valley.
Right. So you're saying because it's a place name, then the meaning, then the instructions of the classifier changes, because now you're dealing with a place name, so that changes. So that's what that's what's being misunderstood. Okay.
Exactly. So I just feel like, so like I said, the reason I interpret it this way, there are two reasons why I'm interpreting this as people living inside the Nile Valley. Firstly, we have other documented cases in which you have a place name and then you change the place classifier with a people classifier and it refers to inhabitants of that place. So we have precedent there that that's the case. And the second is, as I mentioned in our conversation earlier, we don't have any documentation that the Egyptians themselves differentiated peoples according to skin color. None whatsoever. So the idea that this would represent people with black colored skin, like Kemet for the cattle refers to cattle with black colored hide, which is the analogy that he's drawing, I would just say it doesn't have precedent, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what I can say as an Egyptologist. Just knowing the language and knowing what else we have in the language.
That's interesting. Could you go with a little more? Okay, we talked about it earlier, how they didn't call like the Nubians. They didn't refer to it. Could you go back over that a little bit?
That's right. So we have people of various shades of skin color living in Egypt in antiquity and today, and that's because Egypt is an African country, and it stretches from the Middle East into the Sudan, mm-hmm. right? Fact. It always has, and it does now. In fact, and that's an interesting thing about the word Egypt. Sometimes people say, oh, you shouldn't be referring to it in the ancient sense as Egypt because it wasn't called Egypt then. It's like, that's fair, but the land mass itself hasn't changed spectacularly since antiquity. Okay, so this was a space in which stretches literally from the Middle East to Africa, right into Africa, and therefore also has a population that reflects that plurality of cultures. It always has, and it does now. So there are a lot of incredible Egyptians that I meet when I'm on digs in Egypt, in southern Egypt, and they proudly refer to themselves as Nubian. They are people with black-colored skin who are very proud to identify as Nubians. Nubians are an ethnic group that's always been living in Egypt and between Egypt and the Sudan, of a darker-colored skin. So you have an Egypt that has always looked this way. Why would Egyptians distinguish skin color when the plurality of skin color is normal to them. Why? They don't. Right? That's what so you were talking yourself about the idea that, you know, we have shoehorned an idea of race onto antiquity. And I absolutely agree with you. You know, we are enforcing ideas that are really problematic, you know, and really couched in a very, you know, judgment-filled 19th century, let's put everyone into categories kind of ideology. And it's really unfair to ascribe that kind of thinking to an ancient people without any evidence for it.
No, see, I say, yes, I say that all the time. And my thinking is that it was actually, it was that early racism in the Egyptology that kind of followed suit with that. And they actually enslaved Africans. Hitler actually murdered the Jews, all based off of these racial pseudoscientific categories. And I always say that it is out of order to place that back on indigenous people that had not came up against that type of ideology yet. And man, that's a good explanation. That's
can I ask a question too? Like, so another problem is like when they see, okay, like there was a wife of a pharaoh named Kemet, and when they see these names Kemet in these names, they think that every time you see Kim, it's a reference to skin color. If a person has a name like Kenny, Pepe, Ankh Kim, they think like, yeah. So it could it also be related to like the title, maybe the job, or is there other instances where you see it where we can demonstrate that?
It's interesting with Pepe Ankh Kim. I mean, it's really just hard to know why he had this title, like Kem or Kemi. You know, what was it referring to? Did he have particularly black hair? Like, is it a blackish attribute in his person? Is it his character? Is it a color? It's a very hard. Like a lot of nicknames, it's often really hard to know. I've done some work on color terminology in Egyptian. I'm trying to write an article at the moment, and it includes the color Kemet, which is black, because I've been trying to find out whether it also has metaphorical meaning, like whether it means kind of dark, you know, in an aggressive way or in a negative way. Right. And what's really interesting is we don't have that much of that either. So the Egyptians didn't habitually associate darkness with badness,
benevolence, right.
And so we don't even have that. Like, so we can't even say that Pepe Ankh was kind of a bad character. That would be completely missing the point of what the language is actually telling us. Maybe it was because he was fertile, because, you know, the idea of the black land is that it's a fertile land. What I'm trying to say to you is word associations are very culturally inherent, and we can't necessarily trace all of those things. So I'm sorry I have to come up with no clear answer on it, but I think we just have to keep coming back to this is its own sovereign culture. It's got its own incredible language with a degree of meaning that we can trace. And I think we have to respect what there is, what we can see.
Respect the culture. Don't become colonizers and put our ideas on them and make it. Okay.
Please. I mean, of course, you know, we all come with our own little set of
absolutely
lines in our heads. Yeah. As scholars, as you know, we are looking at the language with our own lens. We can't take that off necessarily, but that's why it's important to step slowly.
So as Americans, we can't phantom a world without associating color to human being. We can't phantom that. That's unfathomable for us. Like, what do you mean? We use it every day.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. And that's what makes it so sad, right? That then a culture has suffered so much under this paradigm that now they see it everywhere.
Okay, so as an Egyptologist, y'all actually try to take that out and look at the culture for what it is based off of the evidence that you find and work through your cultural biases. Is that basically what the field is today?
Trying to. We're trying to really do work that says, what can we really see? You know, we're working on emotion categories, we're working on color categories, you know, all sorts of words. I mean, I'm a word researcher. I really like words, which is why I'm really delighted to land in this moment with you all today because I don't usually get asked about this aspect of my research. It's kind of the nerdy part. It doesn't sell well, right? What does this word mean? Hardly anyone ever calls me up for a podcast and wants to talk about my favorite part of my research. And you guys come along and say, hey, let's talk about words and their meanings and categories and their meanings. I'm like, brilliant. Because that's actually a key part of what I do. And I think it really is important to interrogate everything we see relating to a word, understand what it means, as best we can, and then start understanding their own categories, indigenous ontologies that come up within the language.
Indigenous ontologies. I got you. And so it's safe to say that, Garfield, you didn't even give a proper introduction, Garfield. What are you?
I'm waiting for you guys to go to the video. Official.
All right. Okay, hold on. Let's play. Let's go. Let's finish it off. See what he has to say.
Right? And there is no grammatical suffix that will make us think that this is one related to that which is black. That will be a different term entirely. That's a cool argument too, Asar. Mud and the people become binary when they make man out of mud. But I can't make that hypothesis work from everything I've seen in the philology. But I'm not mad at that. Now, yeah, this is a black herd of people. It literally is. And the grammar of the ancient Egyptians let us know this is exactly what they've seen. So these three strokes here don't necessarily indicate plurality in the way that they indicate a collective. See? For instance, do you think they indicate is 3 bulls or more than 3 bulls? This is just a herd. That's one thing. You see what I mean? So if this means Egyptian, social, then what does this mean? You have to be consistent even in your refudiations. Let's suppose you're extracting Egyptian out of this. There got to be some grammatical logic to it. No, see, I think you're making a mistake and confusing this for a term with a TU bird suffixed on it. This is not the people of that which is, because in order to inject of that which is, we need a TU bird. That is Kemet to you.
Did you want to add something?
Well, I mean, it's very interesting, and he's not wrong. Mm-hmm. It is very common. I mean, he knows the grammar. So it is true that the nisba, which is also a term we have in for Arabic to refer to that which is, it changes a word class. It is often written with this tu bird or teal bird. Mm. From what I know, though, about the way that people from the Black Land is written, that it is commonly written like this. I'm not sure why that is. I mean, but this is an alternate. What my rejoinder would be, I think this is a legitimate alternate spelling, and yeah, I'd have to go into the corpus and have a good look. But from what I know, I think this is an yeah. I think this is an alternate spelling because I can see it used for people living in Egypt. And like I said before, if that's not what people living in the Nile Valley, to be really clear, right? People living in the Black Land. From what I know, this is really the spelling. He's right that the spelling can look different to refer to those of, but I think this is actually a perfectly legitimate spelling.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but, I can't. I don't want to also just be so, no, this is wrong.
No, of course not. Of course
it's wrong. There's a real logic that he's bringing into this. I really get it. It's just, like I said, I think it is taking kind of a cultural paradigm that doesn't exist in the culture. That's really, that's really my issue with it, I guess.
And you would translate that as what? Just Egyptian?
The people in the Nile Valley.
Right.
The people in the Nile Valley, yeah, because that's where you get this whole Kemet from, right? Because the Nile Valley is the black part. It's not the whole of Egypt, including all the deserts. It's referring really to those people living inside the cultivated area.
Okay.
Let's see what he finished saying.
There's no TU here. Just like this right here. Social was good. His answer was good, but that was for another inquiry. This isn't Kemet TU. This is Kemet. And we all agree that this is a black herd of cattle. When we change the idiom with the determinatives here, we don't want to say that this is black people. How come?
See,
I don't know.
Yeah, that's me in the chat. He argued, going back and forth.
The problem is we don't have that many cases of this word being used to refer to Egyptians either. Like you often have like people of the beloved land, which happens a lot as well. So, but this is definitely a writing for the plural. I can't actually see in if I look at the corpus, what he has here, this is the right spelling, and there aren't other writings with the teal bird. So, yeah, it's tough.
You have to see the context.
Yeah, I think in context we have to understand it. But it's always it's clearly like writing to, if you look in at, in the context, it's talking about like a ship full of people from Kemet, or what else? You were going to stand before the Kemetiu. You're going to stand before the people living in the Nile Valley. It would be hard to understand what that means. You would stand before the black people. Why? It would really be implying a lot about how the Egyptians frame their own population, and it would mean that they are talking about a very specific part of the population. That's what I'm saying from a cultural perspective. I understand what he's saying from a sort of grammatical spelling perspective, that there are other ways that you could have written this, but yeah, I don't really see, based on the text that I have at my disposal, to agree with his reading.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so that's it. Yeah, so we can stop that right there. Familiar with the work of Diop's, or at least read some of the arguments, right? He made this statement that Kemet actually means the black people. And so has that particular situation been worked out, or is that still a debate? Is that a debate that Kemet could just mean the black people, or as we talked about, the black land or people of the black land? Where, is that a debate to you? Have you heard of it? What is that?
So it wasn't really I wasn't really awake to it in the way I have now been since you showed me the video. I wasn't aware there's kind of a set of African American Egyptologists that are unpacking this, and I'm actually really fascinated by the discussion. As we kind of discussed elsewhere, I do feel like the textual evidence leads us more towards seeing the word as meaning those living within the black land. So I just think when you look at the text in context, it's more likely to mean that. And I do think that it has to do with the fact that Egypt in general, Egyptian texts do not describe skin color of people. So I just feel like there isn't really a lot of evidence for that, and therefore I feel like the theory, I'm not 100% convinced by it as yet. That's not to say that I never will be. It just means that I don't see evidence for it at present.
Yeah, I get that.
I wanted to answer the question because Robert Brown has asked a couple of times, what do I think about Kemet? Meaning the context of the term Kemet. Oh, so my thing is I am about origins, and I am engaged in some long-term background study on things. And I know that that burning ember references Black. But what does it mean in relationship to the town mark? And so for me, that's a long-term research project for me. I don't believe in racial terms in the far ancient past. And I don't talk about the Egyptians as being Black. I move away from that. That's one of the other things. So we were talking about terminology. I talk about African because I situate ancient Kemet as a society that grew up on the African continent after Homo sapiens evolved and began migrating. So being on the continent for 300,000 years plus years, there are a gazillion different ways to be African. What we consider Black is a creation of this modernist, racist society that has developed as part of the whole capitalist enterprise. But so when I talk about the people of ancient Kemet, I call them Africans. Because it's like, now for some modern Egyptians, when you say African, when Zahi Hawass will bust a blood vessel, because for him, African means one type, and that's the dark-skinned West African. He can't conceive of the whole continent containing African people. But when you have been on the continent for 300,000 years and you've been migrating and mixing and combining DNA, there are so many different ways to be African. So so long story short, I'm still, where did Robert go? Is he still on here? Oh, there he is, yeah. So that concept is something that I'm still working on, because I want to see how the archaeology and the migration patterns, how all of those things combine together as an explanation, because I'm really interested in a lot of concepts from about their origins. So that's my take on Kemet.
I like that.
Okay, I like that. Okay, so say we have people that don't have the formal training and they have these ideas. How do they crack? Okay, because I have some friends that really, I got that work. And I'm saying, I don't know if you got that work. I want to see you play it at the highest level. Then I can see if you got that work. That's like being an NBA player, claiming to be, I'm the best basketball player, but you ain't tried it in the NBA yet. You don't really know where you at. Yeah. So what's the best advice that you have for novice like me trying to crack the field and say, yo, I got an idea here. And I want the world to critique it and see it. What's the best mode in doing that? What would you suggest?
I think the best strategy is to be humble with your knowledge. And I say this both in a way of kind of honesty and also manipulation. Manipulation in the best way. So one, honesty. We should all be humble about the limits of our knowledge. This is, again, one thing that as you read more And I think one of the signs, this is kind of like the foundations of knowledge. This is kind of classical Socrates here. That the more you know, you actually realize that you know less than you thought you did. Wow. And that there's so much more that you don't know, and there's so much more to question and be unsure of. So I'd say that this is kind of always a good perspective to take, because it's an anti-patriarchal perspective. Again, it goes back to that kind of unknowing that we talked about earlier in our discussion. So I think that's always a good perspective to take. Now, from the manipulation side, if you email a scholar and you say, I know exactly what I'm doing, you know, like, this is what I've discovered, and tell me, like, validate me.
Okay.
I think if you think about that from the perspective of the scholar that you're emailing, that's a kind of a risky approach, because it's very, you know, again, scholars exist in as many varieties and personality types as, you know, there are people. So some people might read that and they might say, okay, yeah, great. Like, let's see what you thought up with, and I'll give you some feedback. Other people are going to read that and they're going to say, well, what does this person think that they know? Like, they didn't write a PhD, they didn't go to graduate school, and dismiss it outright. Other people are going to say, well, it's an interesting idea, and I'm glad that they're, you know, engaging with this, but they seem to be taking themselves very seriously, and I'm not sure they'd be open to criticism, so I'm not going to really engage seriously with these ideas. So it's always good to kind of take a humble approach and be like, look, you know, I'm thinking about this. This is kind of something I've been mulling over. Do you have any ideas or suggestions? Because I think you're more likely to get again, this is the manipulative side of it. You're more likely to get a response from people from that approach than you are from saying, like, I am the expertly trained and I've taught myself, because then, you know, you're opening yourself up for potential criticism if someone wants to be critical.
I hear you. I like that approach. I'll have a couple conversations, say, look, you might want to try this approach here. I heard Neil deGrasse Tyson say one time, he said, we know enough to know when we right, but most people don't know enough to know when they wrong.
I think we know, we don't even know enough to say when we're right. I think a lot of times when we say we're right, it's kind of a consensus, but this is not, you know, there's no ultimate truth.
Right, absolutely. That's what we learned about the universe, academic and science. There's no ultimate truth. Matter of fact, scientists aren't even interested in truth. It's approximate. Go ahead, Garfield.
Bobby Banger from the block, seen it all raw tough. Streets of Baltimore where survival's always rough. Joined the Marines fighting for a life he could save, but back in the hood he felt like a runaway slave. Started an army, not of guns but of wisdom. I'm a rock squad, truth the anthem, we ain't just a Godkiller Bobby Banger on his path for the truth. Empower the people, give them wisdom as the proof. Black power rising, knowledge shines like a light. He's fighting for the future, ready to ignite. Selling drugs on the corner just to put food on plates, but deep in his heart he knew he had greater fates. From the traps to the lab, he fights ignorance raw, teaching evolution while shaking up the law. The real black atheist is changing the game, waking up minds never the same.